This is a 3D model of the larynx. The larynx sits atop the trachea, seen here with three cartilages in the blue and white fibroelastic membranes here. The cricoid cartilage, seen right here, is often referred to as the signet ring because of its high backing on the posterior view. So I'm going to turn this a little bit. It's hard to see with the way the structures are going, but the cricoid cartilage is actually running here, and here's up to the posterior view back here, and we're going to move back to the front. It does make a complete circle, though there are some other structures that may be obstructing your view there. The cricoid circle is the most inferior of the laryngeal cartilages. Above this, and separated by the cricothyroid ligament, is the largest cartilage of the structure, the thyroid. The thyroid cartilage has a few components which are important to mention. The thyroid notch, seen here. The superior aspect of the cartilage is what is often deemed as the Adam's apple. Its prominence can be felt when running your fingers down the front of your throat. These two quadrangular portions of the thyroid are called the thyroid cartilage laminae. On each side we see the superior horn moving up here of the thyroid cartilage, and then the inferior horn moving down here, which articulates with the lateral sides of the cricoid cartilage. You can see the thyroid cartilage does not make a complete circle and is open in the posterior view, which we'll get to in a second. At the top of the larynx is the hyoid bone, which attaches to the thyroid cartilage via the thyrohyoid membrane here. The hyoid bone, like the thyroid cartilage, features a superior horn and an inferior horn. Peeking out just above the hyoid bone is the epiglottis, which is shaped somewhat like a leaf. You can see that in the back here, and functions to keep objects from going into the laryngeal cavity. It is the epiglottis which covers the cavity when we are eating and drinking to prevent those particles from entering the cavity. The epiglottis is attached via ligaments on the body of the hyoid bone and the inner portion of the thyroid cartilage, the latter which we can see down here. So as we move through the posterior view of the larynx now, we see these dark blue structures down here, and they do have several things attached to them, but these are the arytenoid cartilages. These do attach to the posterior portion of the vocal folds, which we'll get to in a minute, as well as several other structures. Atop these blue arytenoid cartilages are the corniculate cartilages, which are these little horns. In Latin, actually, corniculate translates to little horn. So those are on both of the arytenoid cartilages. Let's move into the laryngeal muscles we see here for a minute. And the first ones that I'd like to talk to you about are the thyroarytenoid muscles, which are actually comprised of, let me see here. So these are actually comprised of both the internal and external muscles, and this was a little bit difficult to do due to the narrowness of this structure. So you see these, the internal thyroarytenoid muscles are here, these yellow lines stretching from the vocal process of each arytenoid. So this is the point of insertion here at both sides here. And the internal thyroarytenoid muscles then stretch to the posterior surface of the thyroid cartilage. These may be called the vocalis and are responsible for tensing. They make up the vocal folds and are responsible for tensing those. Their innervation comes from the X vagus, or the recurrent laryngeal nerve, which you'll see most of the muscles in this structure get their innervation from that nerve. Adjacent to the internal thyroarytenoid muscles are the external. So right next to those yellow internal, or the external, this light orange here. These are also called the muscularis. Their point of origin is the posterior surface of the thyroid cartilage. Their point of insertion is the base and muscular process, which is, again, hard to see, of these blue arytenoid cartilages. The innervation as I said, comes from the recurrent laryngeal nerve as well. Their function is to relax the vocal folds. So staying on the posterior view of the larynx, we also see the posterior cricoid-arytenoid muscle, which, as the name suggests, is attached to the origin, at the origin to the posterior cricoid laminae here on both sides there, with the point of insertion at the posterior aspect of the arytenoid cartilages here. So here's the arytenoid cartilage again. Here we see the posterior aspect of that and the beginning or origin of the cricoarytenoid muscles. The function of these muscles is to move the arytenoid cartilages laterally or to the sides, which abducts the vocal folds. Abduction means that the vocal folds come apart as they would when we are breathing. So this abduction of the folds allows air to pass both in and out of the larynx and into or out of the trachea and lungs. Right above these posterior cricoarytenoid muscles are the transverse and oblique arytenoid muscles shown here. So the transverse is this one, moving from one side of the arytenoid cartilages to the other arytenoid cartilage. So these are moving laterally. The function is to aid in the adduction or closing of the vocal folds. The oblique arytenoid muscles form this X back here, which you see. Their point of origin is the posterior base of the muscular processes, and their point of insertion is here at the apex of the opposite arytenoid. So this would be the posterior and their point of origin, the posterior base, and then we have the point of insertion here at the apex of the opposite arytenoid. The muscles here function to pull the apex of the arytenoid cartilages towards one another or medially, so towards the middle, which causes the vocal folds to come together in adduction as well. Moving around to the anterior aspect of the larynx again, let's take a look at the lateral cricoarytenoid muscle, which has its point of origin on the superior lateral surface of the cricoid cartilage here, and moves up and back, and we'll turn this to posterior view again. This is kind of difficult to see, and a very hard muscle to get a good visualization of. You can see this right here on the inside view of this thyroid cartilage. So that's there on either side. The lateral cricoarytenoid muscle is actually one of the most important, as it will work to move the arytenoid cartilages towards the middle and down, which, so these arytenoid cartilages, it'll move them up and down, and obviously I can't do that too well with this model. But what that does is it helps to bring the vocal folds together in adduction. So innervation here is through the X vagus or recurrent laryngeal nerve. And then finally, I'd like to talk about the cricothyroid muscle, which is innervated by the superior laryngeal nerve rather than the recurrent as seen in the other muscles. Its function is to bring the thyroid and cricoid cartilages together. So here we've got the thyroid and the cricoid cartilages. This is important, and it's a key component of lengthening and shortening the vocal folds, which is critical for pitch changes. The cricothyroid muscle seen here has its point of origin at the lower border of the arch. So here we've got the arch of the cricoid cartilage. You can see it begins here, and then it does move to the point of insertion here. And the point of insertion actually stretches from the lower portion of the thyroid cartilage here at the lamina to the inferior horn, which is all the way down here. So it's kind of large. So that takes care of the cricothyroid muscle. So I believe we've actually hit every structure on this larynx. All of the muscles discussed here are known as the intrinsic muscles of the larynx, are those which are required for tensing and relaxing the vocal folds as well as closing and opening them. So I think that about wraps it up on the larynx for this evening. What a great and important structure.